Hollywood has always promised glamour, but behind the bright lights lurks a chilling truth. Some stars left this world in ways no script could ever imagine. From on-set disasters to bizarre twists of fate, their final moments still leave fans speechless. Which of these shocking accidents do you think was the most unbelievable? Stay tuned, because as we peel back the curtain, you'll find that even fame can't shield anyone from the unexpected. Brandon Lee. It was supposed to be his breakthrough, the role that would cement Brandon Lee as more than just Bruce Lee's son. At only 28, he was cast as Eric Draven in The Crow, a film drenched in gothic atmosphere and destined to become a cult classic. But what happened on set would turn the production into one of the darkest chapters in Hollywood history. During a late-night scene, Brandon was filming a sequence where his character is shot. The gun was loaded with blanks, but in a freak mishap, a fragment from a dummy round lodged in the barrel. When the blank was fired, it acted like a live round. Brandon collapsed instantly, and while everyone thought it was part of the performance, it became clear something had gone terribly wrong. The tragedy shocked the industry. Safety protocols were rewritten overnight, sparking debates about the dangers of firearms on set. The film was eventually completed using stand-ins and early CGI, but every frame carried the weight of what was lost. Brandon Lee's death was more than an accident. It was a cruel reminder of how art and danger can collide in the most devastating way. Even today, fans mourn what could have been. Would he have become the next great action star? Sadly, we'll never know, and The Crow remains both his legacy and his final act. Vic Morrow. Few Hollywood accidents are as infamous or as haunting as the tragedy that struck Vic Morrow. The veteran actor was filming John Landis's segment of Twilight Zone, the movie, in 1982. The scene called for Morrow to carry two child actors across a Vietnam War set, with helicopters circling above and pyrotechnics exploding around them. It was designed to be chaotic, but no one anticipated just how real the chaos would become. As the cameras rolled, a helicopter flew dangerously low to capture the action. Suddenly, a fireball from the special effects engulfed the craft, causing the pilot to lose control. In seconds, the machine crashed directly into Morrow and the children. Crew members stood frozen in horror as what was meant to be thrilling cinema turned into an unthinkable tragedy. The fallout was massive. A high-profile trial gripped Hollywood, with director John Landis and several crew members charged with manslaughter. Though acquitted, the case forced the entire film industry to reevaluate safety standards for child actors and dangerous stunts. It remains one of the darkest cautionary tales in filmmaking history. Vic Morrow, best known for Combat on television, never got to see his role in the anthology film completed. Instead, his name became forever linked to the most chilling accident ever captured on a movie set. Sometimes, the line between fiction and reality is razor thin, and when it blurs, tragedy can strike without warning. Paul Walker. Paul Walker wasn't just a Hollywood heartthrob, he was the face of an entire franchise. As Brian O'Connor in the Fast and the Furious films, he lived life at full speed. Ironically, it was off-screen that fate dealt him the cruelest blow. In November 2013, Walker attended a charity event to raise funds for victims of Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. During the break, he joined his friend Roger Rodas for a short drive in a Porsche Carrera GT, a car known for its incredible speed, but also its unpredictability. What was supposed to be a casual spin quickly turned catastrophic. The car lost control, slammed into a light pole, and ignited in a fiery explosion. Witnesses rushed to the scene, but there was nothing anyone could do. The world woke up to headlines that seemed impossible. Paul Walker, just 40 years old, was gone. The tragedy sent shockwaves far beyond Hollywood. Fans mourned not only the actor, but also the man known for his charity work and humble spirit. The Fast and Furious franchise paid tribute in Furious 7, with a final montage of Walker driving into the horizon, an emotional farewell that left audiences in tears. Paul's death highlighted the razor-thin line between thrill and tragedy. For someone who built his career on fast cars and adrenaline, the irony was gut-wrenching. His legacy remains immortal, not just on film, but in the millions of lives touched by his generosity. Jane Mansfield. Jane Mansfield embodied the glamour and excess of the 1950s and 60s. A blonde bombshell often compared to Marilyn Monroe, she was a tabloid favorite, known as much for her outrageous publicity stunts as for her acting roles. But her shocking death in 1967 was unlike anything Hollywood had ever seen. Mansfield was traveling late at night from Biloxi, Mississippi, to New Orleans with her driver, her attorney, and 3 of her children asleep in the back seat. Their car collided with the rear of a tractor trailer that had slowed on the highway. The impact was so violent that Mansfield, along with the 2 adults in the front seat, died instantly. The rumor mill went into overdrive. Wild stories spread that she had been decapitated, though in reality, she died from severe head trauma. The children, including future actress Mariska Hargitay, miraculously survived. This freak accident had far-reaching consequences. The crash led to new safety regulations for tractor trailers, including the requirement of underride guards, now commonly known as Mansfield bars. In a tragic way, her death helped save countless lives on the road. Jane Mansfield's passing was not just another celebrity tragedy, it was a cultural shockwave. It reminded the world that even Hollywood's brightest stars could be extinguished in an instant, leaving behind myths, legends, and unanswered questions. James Dean. Few names carry the mythic weight of James Dean. With only 3 films, Rebel Without a Cause, East of Eden, and Giant, he became the eternal symbol of youthful rebellion. But his untimely death in 1955 froze that image forever, turning him into an icon. At just 24 years old, Dean was an avid race car enthusiast. On September 30, 1955, he was driving his silver Porsche 550 Spider, nicknamed Little Bastard, to a racing event in Salinas, California. Riding with him was mechanic Rolf Wutherich. Along the way, another car crossed into their path at an intersection. Dean's Porsche smashed into it at high speed. He was killed instantly. The eerie part? Dean had been repeatedly warned about the dangers of his racing obsession. Actor Alec Guinness reportedly told him that if he got into that car, he'd be dead within a week. 7 days later, the prophecy came true. Dean's death stunned the world and cemented his legacy as Hollywood's ultimate what if. His films became cult treasures, and his style influenced generations of rebels, from Marlon Brando to modern-day rock stars. The wreckage of his Porsche even gained a reputation as cursed, linked to further accidents whenever pieces of it were displayed. James Dean didn't just die young, he died in a way that amplified his legend. Forever young, forever reckless, forever remembered. Steve Irwin. Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter, was larger than life. With his khaki shorts, boundless energy, and fearless enthusiasm, he brought wildlife conservation into millions of living rooms. Audiences loved how he wrestled crocodiles, handled venomous snakes, and seemed immune to danger. But in 2006, during a routine dive, fate struck in the most unexpected way. Irwin was filming a documentary called Ocean's Deadliest near the Great Barrier Reef. Swimming in shallow water, he approached a stingray, an animal rarely aggressive. Without warning, the stingray lashed out, driving its barb into his chest. The injury was instantly catastrophic. The crew rushed him to shore, but it was too late. The man who had survived encounters with some of the world's most dangerous animals was taken by one of the least likely. The news stunned fans worldwide, who couldn't believe that such a freak accident could silence someone so full of life. Irwin's legacy lived on through his family and the Australia Zoo, as well as in the countless people he inspired to care about wildlife. His death was not only a freak accident, it was a reminder that even the most experienced experts are never truly safe when nature is involved. Steve Irwin didn't just die doing what he loved, he became a legend in the process. Anton Yelchin. Anton Yelchin was one of Hollywood's brightest young talents, known for roles in Star Trek, Alpha Dog, and Green Room. At only 27, his career seemed limitless. But in 2016, he died in a freak accident so bizarre it still leaves fans in disbelief. Late one night, Yelchin parked his Jeep Grand Cherokee outside his Los Angeles home. The SUV had a known gearshift defect that made it difficult to tell whether the vehicle was in park. As Yelchin stepped out, the car unexpectedly rolled backward down the steep driveway, pinning him against a brick mailbox and security gate. Friends found him hours later, after he failed to show up for a rehearsal. The news devastated Hollywood. He wasn't lost to drugs or scandal, but to a mechanical failure no one could have predicted. The accident sparked outrage, leading to recalls of the vehicle model and lawsuits against the manufacturer. For fans, though, the legal battles could never undo the loss of a gifted young actor whose best roles were surely ahead of him. Anton Yelchin's story is one of the cruelest ironies of Hollywood history, a life cut short not by risky behavior or stunt work, but by a car meant to take him safely home. Isadora Duncan. Though more of a dancer than an actress, Isadora Duncan was deeply entwined with early Hollywood circles. Known as the mother of modern dance, she lived a life as dramatic offstage as on it. But her end in 1927 was so bizarre that it became legend. Duncan was riding in a convertible in Nice, France, wearing a long, flowing silk scarf, her trademark accessory. As the car drove off, the scarf caught in the open-spoked wheel of the vehicle. In an instant, she was pulled violently from her seat. What should have been a simple evening drive became one of the most freakish accidents in entertainment history. The shocking death reverberated through Hollywood. Duncan had been a friend and inspiration to many in the artistic community, including actors, directors, and writers. Newspapers couldn't resist the dark irony. A woman so defined by her grace and beauty, lost in such a violent twist of fate. Her story endures because of its strangeness. To this day, whenever people think of freak accidents in celebrity history, Isadora Duncan's scarf tragedy is often the first that comes to mind. A reminder that sometimes the smallest details, like an accessory, can change everything in an instant. Jan-Erik Hexum. Jan-Erik Hexum was the rising star of the TV show Cover Up. At just 26, he had the looks, the charisma, and the promise of a long career. But one moment of careless humor on set in 1984 ended it all in a way no one could have predicted. During a break in filming, Hexum grew restless, waiting for the crew to set up. Joking around, he picked up a prop gun loaded with blanks. With a smirk, he held it to his head and pulled the trigger. What he didn't realize was that blanks still contain gunpowder and discharge a deadly blast of force. At close range, the pressure fractured his skull. He was rushed to the hospital, but after a week on life support, his family made the heartbreaking decision to let him go. The tragedy stunned Hollywood. Unlike Brandon Lee's later accident, this was no scene gone wrong. It was a young actor's spur-of-the-moment prank with fatal consequences. The incident highlighted just how dangerous blanks can be, forever changing how sets handled prop weapons. Hexum's death became one of Hollywood's saddest what-if stories. A star on the rise, gone in an instant because of a freak accident no one thought could actually happen. Tyrone Power. Tyrone Power was one of Hollywood's most dashing leading men, known for The Mark of Zorro and countless swashbuckling roles. Ironically, it was a sword fight that became his final act. In 1958, while filming Solomon and Sheba in Spain, Power was performing an intense dueling scene with actor George Sanders. The cameras rolled as Power swung his blade and fought with his trademark vigor. Suddenly, in the middle of the action, he collapsed. At first, the crew thought it was part of the choreography, but it wasn't. Power had suffered a massive heart attack on the set. He was rushed to the hospital but passed away before arrival, only 44 years old. The studio was forced to replace him with Yul Brynner and reshoot the film. But the tragedy haunted everyone involved. Power's death was a shock. because it came while he was doing exactly what made him famous, bringing swashbuckling adventure to life. The line between performance and reality blurred in the most tragic way possible, leaving fans to wonder what more he could have achieved. His passing stands as one of Hollywood's most dramatic reminders that even scripted danger can sometimes become real. Leslie Howard. Best remembered as Ashley Wilkes in Gone with the Wind, Leslie Howard was more than just an actor. He was also a filmmaker and patriot. During World War II, he became involved in propaganda efforts to boost Allied morale, but this role may have cost him his life. In June 1943, Howard boarded a civilian plane from Lisbon to London. The flight never made it. German forces mistook the aircraft for a military target and shot it down over the Bay of Biscay. All 17 passengers and crew perished. The incident sent shockwaves through Hollywood. A beloved actor cut down not by age, illness, or scandal, but by the brutal randomness of war. Rumors swirled that Howard was deliberately targeted because of his anti-Nazi stance, adding a chilling layer of intrigue. His death underscored how even celebrities weren't immune to the chaos of a world at war. Hollywood lost not just a star, but a voice committed to something greater than fame. For fans, his legacy became both cinematic and heroic. Leslie Howard's fate was a stark reminder. In times of war, even glamour couldn't shield the innocent. Carole Lombard. Carole Lombard was more than a glamorous actress. She was the queen of screwball comedy and the beloved wife of Clark Gable. Her sudden death in 1942, however, was as tragic as it was shocking. At the height of World War II, Lombard had just completed a war bond tour in Indiana. Eager to return home, she boarded TWA Flight 3, bound for Los Angeles. The plane, however, never arrived. It crashed into a Nevada mountainside shortly after takeoff, killing all 22 on board. The news devastated Hollywood. Clark Gable, inconsolable, enlisted in the Army Air Forces shortly after her death, throwing himself into the war effort. Lombard became one of the first major stars to die in the war years, a symbol of both patriotism and loss. The tragedy had ripple effects beyond Hollywood. President Franklin Roosevelt hailed Lombard as a heroine for her tireless work in raising money for the war. The loss of such a vibrant star at just 33 reminded the world how fragile life could be, even for the glamorous. Carole Lombard's death wasn't just a freak accident. It was the collision of Hollywood, war, and fate, and it left a wound in cinema history that never fully healed. Brandon D. Wilde. Brandon D. Wilde was once hailed as one of Hollywood's most promising young actors. As a child, he earned an Academy Award nomination for his role in Shane 1953, where audiences remember him calling out, "Come back, Shane!" That single moment etched him into film history. But his adult years never quite matched the fame of his childhood, and tragedy cut short any chance of a comeback. In July 1972, while driving in Denver, Colorado, DeWilde was on his way to a stage performance when disaster struck. His vehicle swerved off the road and collided with a flatbed truck. The impact pinned him inside the wreckage, and he died later that evening at just 30 years old. The freak accident stunned those who remembered him as the golden boy of Shane. For many, it was difficult to reconcile the image of the wide-eyed boy star with the harsh reality of such an abrupt ending. Unlike James Dean, whose legend was built around his fast cars and rebellious persona, Brandon's death felt almost random, a reminder of how quickly fate can rewrite even the most promising scripts. Though his career never blossomed into full stardom as an adult, DeWilde's untimely death cemented his status as one of Hollywood's great what-if stories. He remains forever young in the eyes of audiences, preserved in celluloid innocence, and forever linked to one of Hollywood's most devastating freak car crashes, William Holden. William Holden was one of the most respected actors of his generation, with classics like Sunset Boulevard and Bridge on the River Kwai to his name. But his passing in 1981 came not with cinematic grandeur, but with shocking simplicity. Holden was at his Santa Monica apartment when he suffered a fall. Reports suggest he may have tripped or lost his balance, striking his head. Alone at the time, he never recovered. Days passed before his body was discovered. For fans, the news was hard to comprehend. Holden had lived through Hollywood's golden age, traveled the world, and starred in epic films, only to be undone by a household accident. The sheer ordinariness of his end was part of what made it so unsettling. His passing raised awareness about the risks of falls, especially as stars aged. It was a reminder that even larger-than-life figures are still vulnerable to the smallest mishaps. William Holden's death may not have been dramatic in spectacle, but it was in its irony. A man who navigated the perils of war films and stunts, yet met his end at home, in silence. Martha Mansfield. The silent era was filled with daring productions, but few tragedies were as shocking as that of Martha Mansfield. A rising star, she was filming The Warrens of Virginia in 1923 when disaster struck. Between takes, Mansfield returned to her car to rest. A fellow cast member lit a cigarette nearby, and in a freak accident, a stray match ignited her Civil War-era costume. The fabric, made of highly flammable material, erupted in flames almost instantly. Co-stars rushed to her aid, smothering the fire with coats and blankets, but the damage was already severe. Mansfield was rushed to the hospital, where she died the following day at only 24 years old. Her death shook the film industry, serving as an early warning about the dangers of costuming and fire hazards on set. For decades afterward, stricter safety standards were applied to costumes and special effects. Martha Mansfield was on the brink of stardom, and her sudden, horrifying end became one of the silent era's most unforgettable tragedies. She's remembered today as a symbol of how fragile life and fame can be. Natalie Wood. Natalie Wood was one of Hollywood's brightest stars, with iconic roles in West Side Story and Rebel Without a Cause. But her final night in 1981 remains one of Hollywood's greatest mysteries. Wood was aboard her yacht, the Splendor, off the coast of Catalina Island with her husband Robert Wagner and actor Christopher Walken. At some point during the night, she disappeared. Her body was discovered hours later, floating near the boat. The circumstances were murky. Officially, her death was ruled accidental drowning, but rumors swirled about arguments on board and unanswered questions. The case was even reopened decades later, with Wagner named a person of interest, though never charged. The public fascination wasn't just about the mystery, it was about how surreal it was that a woman so tied to water on screen met her end in it. Fans remembered her dancing by the docks in West Side Story and couldn't help but connect the dots in eerie ways. Natalie Wood's death remains a chilling reminder of how fragile and uncertain life can be. Even for Hollywood royalty, her legacy lives on in her films, but her final night continues to haunt the industry. Glenn Miller. Though best known as a band leader, Glenn Miller was deeply connected to Hollywood, providing music for films and performing in musicals. By the 1940s, he was one of the most famous entertainers in the world, but in 1944, he vanished in a way straight out of a mystery novel. Miller boarded a small aircraft in England, en route to entertain U.S. troops in France. The plane took off and was never seen again. No wreckage, no bodies, no answers. Speculation ran wild. Some believed the plane crashed in bad weather. Others suggested it may have been struck by bombs jettisoned from Allied aircraft. The lack of closure only deepened the legend. Hollywood, which had embraced Miller's music in countless films, mourned not only the loss of a performer, but of a cultural force. His disappearance remains one of the great unsolved tragedies of the World War II era. Glenn Miller's story isn't just about a freak accident, it's about how sometimes history swallows people whole, leaving nothing but questions. His music, however, ensured that even if his plane vanished, His legacy would never disappear. Red Fox. Red Fox was known as the King of Comedy, celebrated for his groundbreaking sitcom Sanford and Son. His wit was sharp, his timing flawless, and his humor often pushed boundaries. But in 1991, during rehearsals for his new sitcom The Royal Family, life delivered a cruel punchline. In the middle of a rehearsal, Fox suddenly collapsed. His co-stars and crew assumed it was one of his famous gags. After all, Fox had built his career on comedic pratfalls and mock heart attacks. But this time, it wasn't an act. He had suffered a massive cardiac arrest right there on set. The shocking twist that those around him mistook his real collapse for a joke gave his passing an eerie, almost surreal edge. He was rushed to the hospital but could not be revived. He was 68. Hollywood mourned not just a comedy legend, but a man who broke barriers for black performers in television. His death was a bizarre intersection of art and reality, where the very thing that made him beloved, his comedic timing, obscured the truth in his final moments. Red Fox's exit from the stage of life was as dramatic as his entrance. It was one of those moments when Hollywood was reminded that laughter can sometimes hide the darkest turns of fate. Roy Kinnear. British character actor Roy Kinnear was instantly recognizable to film fans, from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory to Help with the Beatles. Known for his humor and warmth, he wasn't the type of star associated with danger. But on the set of The Return of the Musketeers in 1988, a simple riding scene ended in tragedy. Kinnear was filming in Spain when he fell from a horse while crossing a cobblestone bridge. The impact caused severe internal injuries. Despite immediate medical attention, he passed away the following day in Madrid. He was only 54. The accident devastated his colleagues. Director Richard Lester was so shaken that he retired from filmmaking altogether, saying he could never step on a set again after losing Kinnear. For audiences, Kinnear's death was a reminder that even seemingly routine scenes could carry immense risk. His passing also left a void in the world of comedy and character acting, proof that sometimes the most devastating accidents happen in the least expected places. Roy Kinnear's tragic end underscores how fragile life is, even for those whose careers seem filled only with joy and laughter. Barbara Colby. Barbara Colby wasn't yet a household name, but she was on her way. With guest roles on shows like Columbo and a recurring part on Phyllis, she was quickly establishing herself as a versatile actress. But in 1975, her promising career was destroyed in a freak and senseless act of violence. Colby had just finished teaching an acting class in Venice, California, when she and a colleague were ambushed in a parking lot by two unknown men. Without warning, shots rang out. Colby was killed instantly, while her companion survived long enough to describe the incident. But even then, no motive was ever discovered. The case baffled police. Colby had no known enemies, no connections to dangerous dealings. It seemed to be a completely random, senseless crime. Her killers were never caught. Hollywood reeled at the loss of a rising star taken so abruptly. Friends and fellow actors spoke of her vibrant spirit and potential. For fans, the tragedy was chilling, not just because of her age, but because of how utterly random it seemed. Barbara Colby's story is less about fame and more about fragility. The idea that sometimes the freakest accidents aren't mechanical or natural, but the cruel unpredictability of people themselves. Heather O'Rourke. Heather O'Rourke will forever be remembered as the little girl from Poltergeist who declared, "They're here." Her big eyes and angelic presence made her the heart of the film. But in 1988, at just 12 years old, she became the center of one of Hollywood's most heartbreaking medical tragedies. Heather had been suffering flu-like symptoms for months. Doctors misdiagnosed her condition as Crohn's disease, but in reality, she had a severe intestinal blockage. On February 1st, 1988, she collapsed at home. Despite emergency surgery, she passed away later that day. The freakish nature of her death, an overlooked medical condition in a child who seemed so full of life, shocked the world. It also fueled rumors about a poltergeist curse, given that several cast members from the trilogy also died young. But beyond the legends, Heather's passing highlighted the dangers of misdiagnosis and the importance of proper care. Fans never forgot the haunting irony. The child who seemed to connect with the supernatural on screen was lost so suddenly in real life. Heather O'Rourke's death remains one of Hollywood's most tragic freak accidents, a cruel reminder of how fleeting innocence can be. Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was a force of nature. With films like Enter the Dragon and Fist of Fury, he didn't just act, he transformed cinema, bringing martial arts into the global mainstream. But in 1973, at just 32 years old, he died under circumstances that remain as puzzling as they are tragic. While in Hong Kong preparing for a film, Lee complained of a headache. He was given a common pain reliever and went to lie down. Hours later, he never woke up. The official cause was cerebral edema, swelling of the brain, triggered, doctors believed, by a reaction to the medication. The bizarre suddenness of his death fueled endless speculation. Was it an allergic reaction? A hidden condition? Something more sinister? The lack of clear answers only deepened the shock. For fans, it felt impossible. Bruce Lee was the very embodiment of physical perfection, a man whose lightning-fast moves and iron discipline inspired millions. That someone so strong could be felled by something as ordinary as a pill seemed unthinkable. Bruce Lee's passing wasn't just a freak accident, it was a cultural earthquake. His influence only grew after his death, but his mysterious end ensured he would remain forever larger than life, part man, part legend. Wallace Reed. Before Clark Gable or Cary Grant, Wallace Reed was Hollywood's matinee idol. Handsome, athletic, and endlessly charming, he starred in silent adventure films that thrilled audiences. But in 1923, his career and life ended in one of the earliest freak tragedies of Hollywood. Years earlier, Reed had been injured in a train accident while filming on location. To keep working, he continued performing through the pain, but his health spiraled. Complications worsened until in 1923, at just 31 years old, he collapsed and never recovered. Reed's sudden death shocked fans who idolized him as the very image of vitality. For Hollywood, it was a wake-up call about the pressures placed on actors to keep going, no matter the toll. Though less remembered today, Wallace Reed's passing marked one of the first times Hollywood confronted the fragility of its brightest stars. A freak accident may have started his decline, but it was the relentless grind of fame that ensured he never had the chance to recover. Reed's story stands as both a forgotten tragedy and a chilling reminder that even in Hollywood's golden beginnings, accidents had the power to steal the brightest lights. From fiery crashes to bizarre twists of fate, these stories prove that no amount of fame or fortune can shield anyone from life's most shocking turns. Which of these tragedies left you the most stunned? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. Don't forget to like this video, share it with fellow film buffs, and subscribe for more hidden Hollywood stories. After all, history has a way of surprising us when we least expect it.